early on in your career, there is an element of it's really serious, it's really full on. There's all of this stuff you have to do. It's a corporate environment. And I think sometimes one of the things we forget is that, especially with sales, going and trying new things, going and giving something a go that nobody's done before, and having a bit of a laugh with it is so important. Because ultimately, I think once you start to create an environment where people feel that comfortable trying new things and to doing things that they've not done before, you start to harbor a lot of kind of creativity and innovation certainly within an organization.
You're listening to the Sales Today podcast, and I'm your host, Fred Copestake. On this podcast, we explore how sales professionals can develop a modern approach to winning business, the application of virtual selling techniques, how to create meaningful business relationships, and much more. Why not take our free collaborative selling scorecard to see how your sales approach suits today's environment? You'll find a link in the show notes. And welcome to this episode of the Sales Today podcast, where I'm delighted to be joined by Matt Browning from Dell Technologies. Matt, welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks for having me, Fred. How are things?
Yeah, good. Thank you. And it's going to be better when you start to tell me about next generation selling, which I'm quite excited to learn about, because I've heard you talk a little bit about this.
Yeah.
But so to give you your title, you're the Associate Sales Manager at
Correct.
Dell Technologies. What's an Associate Sales Manager? I know what associate is in some industries, but you have a slightly different definition of what that is and why you're doing it, don't you?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. So I think we've got a couple of different elements to the academy. Now, the associate kind of typically is the first role we have in the academy. And really, it's for the associate, probably, and the best way to describe it is people that typically have just come out of university or people that are very early on in their career that have a real interest in sales. And it's those individuals that typically have been in sales less than 4 or 5 months beforehand and are very much starting out their journey. I think it's an extremely crucial part of certainly what we do at Dell. And I think also just in terms of sales in general is what do the kind of the foundations and the fundamentals look like when you're starting out on your sales career? So from our perspective, an associate very much is somebody at the start of their journey who's getting out into sales and then looking to progress further on from that.
Okay, cool. So someone early career sales, and you mentioned the academy. Okay,
Yeah.
so I referred to next generation sales, but really I should have said the next generation sales academy is how Dell Technologies will take these guys, these associates, these people who are keen and want to get into the world, and give them, from what I can see, the best possible start they can get. Is that right?
Yeah, it's exactly that. Yeah, it's very much what we do, and typically the academy runs across the first 3 years of their career at Dell. Ultimately, the whole reason the academy came around was really how do we create something internally that we can utilize people who are already trained up, who understand our messaging, and then bring them out into field sales. But then the other side of it, I think, really, and where kind of the heart of everything lies, is the development side of things. What we're doing to young salespeople and how we're helping young salespeople develop in their career to really, and I think that this is the big thing for me, is have confidence, be able to pick up a phone with somebody and pick up the phone and go and meet somebody, and off the back of that, feel comfortable doing that. And I think that element of building confidence throughout somebody's time, especially whether it's straight out of university or certainly earlier on in their career, I think building confidence and having people around you that allow you to do that is fundamentally is so important.
So it sounds to me a bit more like an academy at a sort of a football club, a rugby club, something like that, where you're learning the skills, but you're using them and being developed for the first team in a couple of years' time, as opposed to academy, which is an august institution where you just learn things and recite them back to see if you pass an exam.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really nice way to put it, actually, Fred. So I think one of the big things that we try and encourage across the time in the academy before they typically go out into a field sales role or an account executive role is exposure. And I think it's like anything, that the more people get to see, the more people learn, but then also get to actually do. Typically, again, I go back to the word confidence, the more confident they become. And I think that the whole reason that we have the academy across 3 years, and again, I think it would be useful in any sort of junior salesperson's career, but is we want them to see and do as much as possible. And I think that's where the exposure comes in, whether it's exposure to very senior salespeople, whether it's exposure to going and meeting customers, whether it's exposure to how to pitch a product, how to do a whiteboard, whatever it is, we want to increase that as much as possible. And typically those individuals that kind of get on board with that and do expose themselves to a lot of different aspects of business, sales, whatever it may be, typically are people that start to move through that process a lot more quickly.
Yeah, because when you look at kind of these surveys and things that people are saying, what's going to be useful for future careers and also what customers are wanting, which I think is something we should probably look at a little bit more. They talk about business acumen. They talk about being able to work in a real life space rather than sort of theoretical or just talk about your own products, your own services. We talk about business, talk about our world.
Yeah.
Okay, so imagine that I'm fresh-faced out of university.
Yeah.
I know it's a stretch of the imagination. and I'm like, no, I fancy going this sales thing. And I get accepted because I guess there's an application and you're looking for good people to come into this.
Yeah.
I get accepted. What will my journey in the academy look like? How are you going to kind of get me up to speed and then ready for that exposure and build that confidence?
Yeah, of course. So we typically have there's three different elements really, Fred. The first 6 weeks of starting the academy, it is very much your typical training. The first 6 weeks is a training. This is really all around understanding kind of who Dell are, kind of what kind of we look for, what we do, the areas we span across, etc. And then in terms of kind of the roles that we have in the academy, there's two major roles. So as we mentioned earlier, there's the associate role. Typically what we look at within the associate role is, as I've mentioned, kind of how do we expose people as much as possible to sales, but then really ultimately start doing the job, start speaking to customers, start understanding kind of what people are looking for at the minute, start understanding are there any trends, and really you are thrown in at the deep end there. And I think that's something you certainly have to get a balance with, because I think you go too far with that and people feel too much pressure, you haven't prepared them enough, and therefore they almost crumble. But then you want to do it so much so that, as you all know, Fred, that the more you do something and kind of the more uncomfortable you feel, actually your development starts to pick up a lot quicker. And again, I guess there's that famous thing that start to get used to feeling uncomfortable, because if you're feeling uncomfortable, typically you're doing something in which you're then learning from it. So I would say the associate role very much encompasses that piece of pick up the phone, have fun, go and see customers, go and do things that you've never done before, and just almost be a sponge. Just soak everything up, be as curious as possible. And of course, start to, again, as I say, understand if there are trends across different verticals or customers that you can start to pick up on. Now, after the associate role's done, we then move on to our account manager role. Now, this is probably what you would almost see as a little bit more of the more sort of typical sales role. You have a list of accounts. Within this, you then obviously sell into those accounts. Now, again, I think the one thing to mention here is there's obviously seems to be, if you look at the two roles, far more development early on than when you get into the account manager role. What I would say is, and I think the one fantastic thing that we have is the development across each stage of your career. And I don't actually think it's just within our academy at Dell. I think it's across any role, but the development is at the heart of everything that we're doing, because ultimately, if you're not continuously learning, and I think especially with an industry like IT, I think you will fall behind quite quickly. And I think you can be as good as you want to with people, and I think you can have so many different areas of sales that you can be brilliant at. If you don't have that coaching piece behind you and you're pushed constantly, I think then you start to potentially lose sight of what it is you're actually going and what your message is. The two roles within the academy, I think the heart of what we try and push is certainly how do we give these guys enough structure? How do we make sure that they have enough structure and direction, that they're consistently progressing? But then I think also as well an area of independence, and I think that's the exposure side of things, is how do we give these people time and kind of the resource to go and do it themselves, go and have conversations themselves. And listen, if they make mistakes, then they make mistakes, right? But at least you learn from something every time you do it.
Yeah. So do senior people make mistakes as well, don't they?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But no, I love that. Yeah, IT and sales now both continuously evolving. And if you've not learned to learn and you're not open to that and you're not continuously evolving, you'll just fall behind.
Yeah.
And is that something that you're looking at right at the beginning when you're accepting people for the academy? That kind of that coachability piece or the
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. So I think there's a few different elements that I'd say we probably look for, but I certainly think that element of curiosity is probably a big thing for me, because that and I guess that you can split it up into various different elements, but I think the curiosity of kind of always wanting to go and seek out new information, I think, is a really important skill. Again, I think we probably just touched on it just then with the want to go and learn, I think is really important. But then it almost goes through different areas of life. If you then, let's take it with you going to meet a customer, you're consistently curious as to find out more about that customer, and then more questions come off the back of that, and then typically you start to understand them more, what they want to achieve. So I think certainly it's something we look for very early on, is who is somebody that is kind of asking a number of different questions, consistently trying to better their understanding of something. Because the more we see that early on, when we provide the coaching, all that does is escalate it to a level that these individuals then become hyper curious, and they typically, as a result, are very independent in their own learnings, their own customer base, and even outside of life. That they are typically somebody that has control over a lot more things.
Yeah, love it. So, training, coaching, you've thrown those words around,
Yeah,
probably in a similar way to I do, which is I'm not massively pedantic about them compared to some people. It's like stuff to help people get better. Yeah. Or have I interpreted that wrong? Is it that early on we tell this is what Dell's about, we give training as in learn these things, and then as you're becoming further down the line with the account manager, it is a more coaching type conversation, a bit of a training course, bit of new knowledge, but how can we develop that getting better with that more pull rather than push type stuff?
Yeah. Again, I think a really important part of this, actually. So I think ultimately, especially early on in someone's career, I think you've got to make sure they have the right tools to be able to then actually coach that further down the line. And I think it's certainly a responsibility on myself, and again, I think any organization really, to make sure that if you have an expectation of somebody, and it's not necessarily even just in sales, I think if you have an expectation on a particular person within a company, you have to ensure that you've given them the right material, tools, and I think, again, exposure, confidence, for them to be in a position that they are then coachable. Now, again, I think it's like anything, it's a two-way street, right? I think we have to do that in terms of the providing element, but then as an individual, you also have to be willing. I'm sure there are cases where people go into, I think it's the age-old thing, if somebody's been doing something for 50 years in a particular way, and then someone says, no, we're going to do it this way, it's very difficult to shift their mindset, because it's very difficult to get them on board with that. But I think certainly earlier on in their career, you're completely right. I think it is a case of, this is how we advise to do it. But what I would say is, if somebody comes in and they say, well, hang on, I've done it this way, or what about this way, they provide something brand new, then absolutely fine, right? We're not going to argue with that. And if it works, then fantastic. I think it's an element of just being open-minded and just trying different things. And I think, as you say, it's then, you're right, moving through the academy, it is an element of more around coaching. And you have the core skills and you have the fundamentals. How can we then help with the little tweaks?
I love that. And so early doors, so let's go back in. So remember, I'm still this fresh-faced young lad coming out of uni. Yeah, I'm there. Week 1, week 2. Is it, so in my mind, and I'm quite a visual thinker, it is like an academy, and that there it is, and there's a room, and there's a bunch of chairs, and we're there, and we're like for 6 weeks on the trot, almost having, I don't know, maybe guest lecturers come in, there's some core skills trainers, there's people from different parts of the organization lecturing, so to speak. And I'm sure the training is not just a lecture, giving classes, that's a better word, to put that information in place, and then we're going out and applying more. Is that more or less right in my mind?
Spot on. So yeah, it is very, the first 6 weeks are very much the material is delivered to you.
Yeah.
After the 6 weeks, you then deliver the material to the customer. And that is what I would, how I would put it. It's very much first 6 weeks is you soak everything up. Then after that, you're thrown into the deep end, and it's your kind of chance then to say, listen, this is what I've learned. Let me show you.
Cool.
So,
yeah. Oh, that is cool. That is cool. So just thinking about some of that stuff in the first 6 weeks, what are some of the core things that you think, well, we are going to put people out there, but we cannot let them go out and ill-equipped without having this and this. What are some of those things that you'll install? That's using an IT term.
Yeah, no. So again, so I think the first thing fundamentally is just a good understanding of where I guess Dell are unique, right? I think that's definitely certainly something that's really important in terms of, do they have a level of comfortability around who they're working for? Do they have the right tools and again material to go and have a conversation with somebody? How do you structure a call? How do you go on and introduce yourself? And I think that's, again, we've mentioned it a couple of times here, but the confidence piece. I think certainly everybody has to have a certain level of understanding of, this is how we would typically approach a customer. This is how we would typically approach a sales call. I think almost the basic training. I don't think there's anything that I would say within those 6 weeks that is an absolute must. I think it is areas that we cover that we feel as though our sales reps will need. Now, that is whether that can be from a product briefing, it can be from the technical knowledge, but could it also be how you structure a call, how you close a call, how fundamentals, which I'm sure, Fred, you'll know really well. So I think it's almost the high level stuff. I think what actually tends to happen is when we get them out and it's after that 6 weeks and they start to get on the phone, that's when what we start to do is create an individual development plan. And off the back of that, you then have some people are extremely, it seems that some people are extremely confident with certain areas, and then as a result, they're not confident, and therefore you focus on those development areas. And then again, some people are the complete opposite. And again, it's why I typically, and again, as an academy, we very much do, is we have these individual development plans, because everybody's development is going to be very different and it's going to cover so many different areas. It has to be done on an individual basis.
Oh, I love that. Hey, again, to make sense of stuff, I use lots of analogies for me more than anything else. So again, I suppose it's almost going to the army, and like you do basic boot camp almost, and everyone does the infantry stuff, and then you go off and you might become an engineer. You might stay in the infantry. You might go into like another part, like an engineer or something. And people are starting to self-select almost in that, oh, I like working on the phone and using video.
Yeah.
Okay, we can see where you're going to benefit. I love being out and about. Okay, I like talking to people about this particular world of finance or whatever. Okay, cool, good. Build that then. Let's build it. Let's get you so good at that stuff that you'll be the best in that sphere compared to anybody else, any of our competitors. Because you're directing yourself there, and we are just equipping you to be as good as you can be.
Yeah.
Be the best you can. Oh, there you go, Army.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and do you know what? I think it's quite it's obviously quite a very difficult thing to achieve, but it's almost ultimately working towards the goal of how do you become an expert in what you're doing. And again, as I say, typically we're dealing with people who are younger and less tenured in their sales career, but it's just that encouragement piece to say, this is what we've seen previously. This is where we think you could be really good. And also, I think once understanding where somebody does feel confident and they are really strong, is that there's a two-pronged approach. Is, okay, well, the other areas you're not confident in, how do we build those? But the areas that you are, how do we push that to the next level? How do we get you operating from a 60% to a 70% to an 80%? So I think that the way I would almost encompass it is it's wanting and trying to allow people to have a continuous development and continuous growth from when they start.
And so how long has because we're talking, this is the next generation of salespeople, again, awesome name for this. how long has that Next Gen Academy been in place then? How long have you been doing it?
Really good question. So I think roughly around 15 years, 15 to 20
Okay.
years. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so after the 3 years, what happens? Are you like, there you go, graduation
Yeah.
into the big wide world, and what is the plan? Is it that then you are within corporate and they will look after you and you'll do what you do, but you'll probably be seeking more training and be quite demanding in, hey, I'm used to being given stuff to get better. I want more of
Yeah.
it. Is that kind of how it plays out?
Yes. So the way I would probably look at it is that the academy and our sales academy is very much attached to our core corporate business, right? So we work alongside all of Dell in the UK, certainly from a sales perspective. So we're in constant sort of touch point and contact with that. So when that 3 years is done and potentially they go into a field sales role, now the only major difference really here is we have obviously our account executives and field sales role outside of the academy. That's typically what the next step is for a lot of people. Now, again, and I think it's one great thing in terms of kind of the training that we give people is that it, if you don't want to go and do that, and that's not what you want to go and do, then don't go and do it. You don't have to go and do that. It is just an option that we can provide. Now, again, with the way Dell is, then I think there's so many different options people can go into. But yeah, I think in terms of kind of the typical route we see, it's 3 years in our academy, and then you will then go and join one of our account executive teams or field sales role teams outside of the academy.
Okay. And when you say someone doesn't want to, is that because I've decided after 3 years of doing this, I don't want to be in sales?
Yeah.
You'd probably figured that out before. Are we talking more? I've started getting really curious about customer success because we promise customers outcomes, and I just really love it and delivering that. Awesome. Get down that route then, because you will use all of those skills that we've been talking about. Your questioning skills, proposal writing, influencing, negotiate. You're using all of that in customer success. Crack on. And do people come back as trainers? Like,
Yeah. So do you
I
know
don't know
what?
what's going on in my head today. I'm now thinking like Top Gun.
Yeah. Well, I think it is very interesting though, and I think it is super interesting because we try and do that as much as possible. Because another thing that we start to see 100% is when we've had people go and again, there's been so many success stories we've had from throughout the academy. If you can have somebody come back, and especially to the people that have just started, and say, "Hey, listen, I did this. I went through this. I made mistakes along the way. This is what I kind of regret doing. This is what I thought worked really well. This is what I'm doing now." It gives people a bit of and again, I think it comes down to the exposure piece, but it gives people a very good goal almost to work to, because they can actually, you're stood in front of them for probably the first time and you go, this is what you can achieve. And they think, okay, thanks for that, Matt, but that's 3 years away. It's irrelevant, this. I think when you have somebody come in and say, I've done it, been there, done it, and I've worn the t-shirt, it helps them start to put that into a bit of a reality. And I think off the back of that, you can certainly see it whenever you run those sessions with people that certainly have come through our program and then are in kind of done super well. Then you can see kind of motivation changes. Again, you can see people's emotion in the room. People start to set up more, and they're a bit like, "Oh, hang on a minute, this is quite interesting." And therefore, I think it's such an important tool, because it's like anything. If you can give people the confidence and encouragement that somebody has done it, somebody has made mistakes along the way, but has come out the other end and has been a huge success, then again, they start to relax a little bit more and think, I'm going to give this all I've got now, because this has given me some motivation.
Yeah. So do you get that kind of that scenario where somebody else will say what you've been saying loads, and then when they say it, everyone sits up and smiles and says yes and believes it? You think, I've been saying that for six weeks. Why didn't you believe me? Yeah. No, mate, it happens when I'm training, and often the sales manager has said a bunch of stuff. I'll come in and say something, and they're, oh yeah, great idea, friend. They're like, why do they believe you?
Yeah, 100%.
It's funny. You just have to deal with it.
Happens far too often, probably, I think.
But it's good though, depending on your attitude. It sounds like your attitude, well, that's exactly I could deal with it, and that's exactly the outcome I want, which is them being enthused and motivated. And that's why I will pull these people in. My ego can deal with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, 100%. No, I think it's really useful. And again, I always say it to the team that I look after at the minute. We do it in team meetings as well. I try and get different people to come into the team meeting, because again, it's the same as anything. Constant repetition of hearing somebody who has the same voice moan about the same things, it is probably a bit of a painful experience. And I think, again, it's all, again, that probably goes back to the word I've used loads, is the exposure piece. Meet different people, get different perspectives from different people, let them tell them about their journey, and give some insight into what their journey looked like, again, because I think it gives people a little bit of a direction. And I think once we start to see them have a bit of a direction and a bit more of a focus, again, that we then go on to the second buzzword I've used quite a lot, is the confidence piece.
Well, it's fine to keep using them, and you'd be crazy not to, because to be fair, you could be talking to the person who came out of the academy, let's say 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And you still need them. They should still be looking for that. Now, maybe they're looking for more exposure at C-level, because that's where they're now trying to sell, because that's where the career's taken them. And that's a brave new world, and that'll be pushing themselves out of the comfort zone and having to learn how to do things in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
You know, and having the confidence to have eye-level type conversations with people like that. So it keeps all the way through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
I love that. So what advice, so based on your own training experience and working with a bunch of people and seeing what they respond to, what advice would you give to somebody who is just starting out in sales today?
It's a really good question, because I think that there's so many different things. But I think certainly for me, the first thing is have fun with it. And I know it sounds quite a cliche thing to say, but I think sometimes when you come out of kind of university, or you're certainly early on in your career, there is an element of, it's really serious, it's really full on. There's all of this stuff you have to do. It's a corporate environment. And I think sometimes one of the things we forget is that, especially with sales, going and trying new things, going and giving something a go that nobody's done before, and having a bit of a laugh with it is so important. Because ultimately, I think once you start to create an environment where people feel that comfortable trying new things and to doing things that they've not done before, you start to harbor a lot of kind of creativity and innovation certainly within an organization. So the first thing I would say is have fun with it. Of course, take it seriously when it needs to be taken seriously, but go and try something different. Go and do something completely obscure. And if it doesn't work, listen, it doesn't work, because making a mistake is absolutely fine. That time of your career is the time to make mistakes and learn from them, etc. So go and have fun with it, and go and enjoy it as much as possible. I think that's the first thing. I think certainly, another element of it is build a network, and it's quite a difficult thing to do that, because I think certainly when you come out, you don't know loads of individuals, you don't know so many people, but when you do go into an organization, go and meet as many people as you can possibly meet. And it's something I tried to do when I started, and I encourage my team to do. I almost encourage them to meet someone new every week, because the more people you can meet, the more perspectives you have, and really just the more advice you can get from people. And again, I still try and do it to this day, but the better, really, because you start to, across all of those different opinions, across all of that different advice and all of the experience, you then start to be able to basically take all of those different parts and almost make something yourself. So I think definitely building a network is crucial. And then I think the final piece, Fred, really is getting used to feeling uncomfortable. And I think that is that it is fine if you are feeling uncomfortable, you are typically learning. And the one thing I would always say, and I can see it when you get people towards the back end of their tenure in the role, they start to feel a bit more comfortable because they're not learning as much, they're not being stretched as much, and as a result, it's like, okay, we know it's time now for you to move on and have a new challenge. So I think get used to being uncomfortable. It is probably something that is so important. Go and try something brand new. Go and present in front of somebody senior. Go and whatever it may be. The more times and the more often you do that, you will benefit from that later down the line so much.
They are absolute crackers. I love those. I really do love those. So have fun, but that's by doing things that people haven't done before. Yeah. Because so much sales advice out there is do it like this, do it like this, do it like this, do it like this. And you've used the word structure. I use the word framework. And we say, look, there's broadly things that you need to do, but build your own style around it. And stuff's changing so quickly. What somebody saying, this is the way to do it, from when? And there's new techniques, new things. We were chatting about AI before we hit record, didn't we? Just
Yeah,
even
exactly.
that kind of thing. Building your network, and the way you described that, loved it. Because you said, oh, it's quite difficult. But no, it's not. Got LinkedIn now. But you weren't talking about collecting a bunch of connections. That thing about asking for perspectives, insights. And senior people love giving that. They love giving it, which is an advice anyway in sales world. When you're talking to customers, ask for advice as opposed to tell them how to do stuff. Yeah. Feeling comfortable. Yeah. Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Oh, brilliant set of things. Cool. Time has just flown. So where can people get in touch with you if they wanted to learn a little bit more, ask your opinion on something, get some advice from you, apply?
Yeah,
I don't know.
no,
Where
100%.
can we get in touch?
Yeah, so listen, in terms of the best place to reach out to me, if people obviously do have LinkedIn, right? I'm on LinkedIn, Matthew Browning, Associate Manager at Dell Technologies. You'll be able to find me there. But then, of course, in terms of email, etc., then listen, my email is matthew.browning@dell.com. People are more than okay to reach out if they have any questions. And then, of course, the Dell Technologies website, right? We have a full careers page with kind of everything on there. I try and the first time I ever speak to people that do apply and go through it, I just want to get to know them. It's not a case of I want somebody to come in and present their CV and do that stuff. I just want to know a little bit about them. But everything on our careers page, if anybody has any questions, and of course to let me know. But any of kind of the roles we have there will be listed there.
Awesome. We will put links to each of those into show notes, so people listening can just go straight click through and do that.
Perfect.
Matt, brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing that. Really interesting stuff. And I hope there's some kind of seasoned old pros out there who are listening to this and sort of taking a little bit of that stuff on board as well.
Yeah, for sure. No, I really appreciate it, Fred. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Today podcast with me, your host, Fred Copestake. I hope you've enjoyed what you heard today. If you did, please get in touch and hit subscribe. And remember, you can take the Collaborative Selling Scorecard for free to check out how your sales approach works in today's environment. You'll find it in the show notes.